Welcome to The Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee. And today, it is my pleasure to be in conversation and to welcome my next guest, the Executive Director of the Baltimore National Heritage Area and a champion of promoting Black history and cultural heritage through programs, outreach, and grant initiatives. Please welcome Shauntee Daniels. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, I'm glad to be here. It took us 6 months to get here, so we're here now.
Well, when it happens, it happens. It's supposed to happen when it's supposed to happen.
It's true. It's true.
So, it's great to be here on site, by the way. I was kind of like popping around a little bit. I was like, oh, it's history over here. I was like, I like this. Yes,
welcome to Union Square, Hollins area. You are sitting in the former home of H.L. Mencken, Henry Louis Mencken, for those who don't know who H.L. Mencken is. And the people that respect him the most call him the Sage of Baltimore. I have my own personal opinion about Mr. Mencken, but that's my opinion. And this opportunity to be in this house was a big deal for the Heritage Area to find a permanent home as an office space. So I'm not mad about that, but it is the home of H.L. Mencken.
So we kind of have like the location part, right, kind of covered. So before we get to like the main crux of the conversations, we have a few topics to talk to. You got the notes. Can you tell the listeners out there a bit about yourself and what you do? Like, I think obviously there is an intro that I do, but my intro is always cut and paste. This is coming from online. I use ChatGPT, put this in, this is the guest. Okay. So I like to have the guests really articulate who they are and what they do. I think there's more power in that.
Well, my title is Executive Director of the Baltimore National Heritage Area, and basically my real function is to manage the organization, facilitate the vision of the organization through a number of different ways. Grant funds, producing programs that benefit the residents of Baltimore. My interest is more specifically the youth of Baltimore as opposed to the older generation, because they have their own history of Baltimore. Mm-hmm. But the youth do not have a history of Baltimore as far as the historical identity of Baltimore on a national level. So that is one of the things that is a part of my responsibility. Then comes the day-to-day operations of reports, personnel management, office management. So those are the things that, and as an executive director, we're just going through a 5-year strategic plan, and one of the things that was mentioned in the interviews that were taken by individuals in the community is that I am a convener. I am the one that brings people together to have conversations about where we're going, how we attract tourists, how we continue to narrate and the story of Baltimore. So that's another thing that I am, is I'm a convener. Yeah. And the organization is the glue with our grant funding and keeping our cultural and heritage institutions moving forward, operating. We continue to operate during COVID and in supporting our partners. One of the things that the partners had a real problem with, it was operations while they were closed. So we changed our grant program we pivoted to more of an operational grant funding instead of a programming, because they didn't really need programming. Right. They needed operational funds. Of course, ARPA and all these other programs helped them, but sometimes you just needed a little bit to carry you forward until those funds were dropped in your account. So that's one of the bigger things. The other thing is working very closely with smaller museums. So I am not talking about museums like the BNHA, AVAM. AVAM is medium, I would say, but it has its own following, it has its own funding base, sure, and it's different. But we don't really work that closely with or fund big projects for the BMA, the Walters, the other museum I'm thinking of that really kind of like doesn't need it's not a museum. So Fort McHenry is not a museum, but it is a historic site. Yeah. So we don't really actively solicit applications from them.
Sure.
We are looking at the smaller, medium size, the BMI, the Baltimore Museum of Industry, the Women's Heritage and Cultural Center, little small museums that are niche museums that are really tell the story of Baltimore. Yeah. Because they're here, but they tell a more global story. The Streetcar Museum is here. So those are the museums that we support. So as an executive director, it is my main responsibility to see the vision that these things are carried out through our management plan and through our mission statement.
Thank you. That's great. I think it gives more life to like what happens here, what do they do, you know? And I think there's a couple things that definitely come to mind. You mentioned vision at the end, right? And you know, I always like look at folks when I'm pitching ideas like, this would make sense to do this. I'm of this, I'm from here, I know this, all of this stuff, but also I'm 38, so that's another thing. But I've seen things, you know, and it is sort of one of those things of when I'm pitching an idea to someone, I'm like, either they get the vision or they don't get the vision. They understand why this is a good idea or they don't. But it's not my job to audition, it's to pitch it, and it's vetted and all of that stuff. And the other side of it is, I love this notion of working with some of the smaller like niche institutions, because oftentimes I think folks don't know that, oh, that's here, or even the conversation of Baltimore is the city of firsts, and look at all of these lists of firsts. So I think that's really, really great. And we're going to put a pin in some of that stuff. And I want to go back to two sort of like sub questions that I have on this initial one. So this one, I like it. I like this question a lot. Finding our calling isn't always a direct line. Sometimes it's like my chords when I came in here, and it's just like, I gotta untangle this. Tell me about a time, like, you know, during your like professional or life journey where you were encouraged to explore, whether it be explore places and getting something out of that in that way, or explore like different career paths. Tell me a bit about that.
Oh man.
See, it sounds different than when I wrote.
Well,
right?
Yeah, it does sound different, but the thing about it is that I have, how I arrived here is just a really weird kind of story. But let me go back. So I am a boomer. So I just want to let your readers know I'm a boomer. I have a very, how should I say, contemporary lifestyle.
Sure.
As a boomer. I'm right on the cusp. So there is a time when you are in your, unless you're in school to study history or be a, you know, archaeologist or something like that, there's a time when history is just put on the shelf. Yeah. You learn it in you learn social studies in grade school, you learn your civics in high school, and then you move on, and unless you're really interested in it, you kind of put history on the shelf. I grew up in Utah.
I read that.
Yes, you did. And no, I'm not black. I am black, and no, I'm not a black Mormon. Okay, so let me just clear that out for your listeners that I'm not a Mormon. I grew up in Utah. A very different kind of life for me, whereas I have my family core and my immediate tribe was African American community. I went to a parochial school, so my friends were white. And then I would come across the fence and through the back fence and come home. So my experience has always been very multicultural. Sure. My friends have been white, Italian, German, and we went to a Catholic school, so Roman Catholicism is all built in there. And then I would come home and I would be with my black tribe and go to Pentecostal church, go to Baptist church. So my experience has always been multicultural. Yeah. I am one of 5 grandchildren, and I am the middle. Why does that relate to anything? Because I have always been an independent spirit. Mm-hmm. And because of the multicultural growing up, the independent spirit, because I had to occupy myself. My siblings are 5 and 10 years younger than I am. And then my other cousins are 3 and 4 years older than me. So I was in the middle of absolutely just my own little world.
Yeah.
And that upbringing made me curious about other people.
Yeah.
How other people did things, why other people do the things that they do. I don't particularly like the word code switching, but I got really good at it. Mm-hmm. And so it carried me all the way through. So I want to fast forward, because I'll go back to the profession, but I'm going to fast forward to my arrival in Maryland. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I want to fast forward, because it will give you some perspective in how I got in this place. When I arrived here with little or no information about African American history other than the NAACP, because that's what my grandfather said, you always want to have your NAACP card, and you always want to have your voter's registration card. Those are two things that black people need to have.
100%.
Don't care, whatever you do. And please don't go to the train station with your greasy chicken sack. That was my grandfather. So you get an idea where I was coming from. So, and so when I got here, I think the only African Americans that I had really heard anything about was Thurgood Marshall, mm-hmm. Cab Calloway, Billie Holiday, and Martin Luther King.
Yeah. So
of the four, where are 3 of them from?
Baltimore.
So I had an experience of working in D.C. I just felt, at the time I arrived here, which was 22 years ago in Maryland, D.C. area, D.C. was not the place that it is now.
Sure.
It was still kind of carrying the chocolate city.
Yeah, I was waiting for you to say chocolate city.
It was still carrying that, but I could see it was turning pretty mocha, and now it is latte.
It's like when people say, "What do you want in your coffee?" I'm like, "Look, can you just make mine black?"
Just black, right? So I was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I was just uncomfortable because I'm so used to a multicultural place.
Yeah.
So I'm working down there, and I came to Baltimore for a business trip, and I was hanging out, and I was like, this place reminds me of another place I've been before, which was San Francisco Bay Area, because I lived there for 22 years. Huh. Arrived in San Francisco, another story, but I arrived in San Francisco because it had my mother moved to Los Angeles with with my stepfather, and LA was too segregated for me.
Right. Yep.
And I went to visit my aunt in San Francisco, and I was like, oh, this is where I need to be. Because it was a multicultural explosion. It was just all, but I want to get back to my story while I'm here. So I'm going all over the place. I'm going tangential here, right? Mm-hmm. I came up here and I saw people of every ethnicity, every shade, that were just hospitable.
Yeah.
And I said, this is where I should be.
Yeah.
This is where I should be. But as things have it, I still got to work down in D.C. I still got to live in Prince George's County, because that's where my money's coming in. I don't have a job here. Where am I going to go work here? I don't know anybody. And so I got really bored with the job I had, which was a classified sales manager and administrator to a government magazine.
Like those details right there, I like that.
Yeah. And I was like, this is so boring. I'm just dying, you know what I'm saying? And a friend of mine said, why can't you just take the money and just sit there on your computer and, internet surf? I said, I do not want my brain to atrophy. Mm-hmm. I want to experience and know something and grow my mind. So I came up here and I decided to go into tour guiding. Mm-hmm. And so I took some classes, I did some research, I sent out my resume, and a small tour operator that a lot of people know about is Baltimore. I'm giving them a shout out, Baltimore Rent-A-Tours. We call him Mr. Maryland. He interviewed me. He had just bought the business, and he was looking for African American tour guides that would do what they call step-on guides. Step-on guides are the ones that get on the bus with people and they take them on, when you see those large buses going all around Baltimore, that's the person that's giving them a narrated experience. Well, if you don't know anything about the city, what do? You go home and you open up your computer and you get books and you get everything that you possibly can and you start sucking it all in. You just start absorbing it like a sponge. And that's when I got to know that I was sitting in a place that had more African American history and more connections to who I was, to my journey. And I said, this place is the best.
Yeah.
And so I did the tour guide thing, and then I got a job with the Baltimore City Heritage Area as an urban ranger. And those are the people that give walking tours downtown. So I used to give walking tours of downtown, Heritage Walk as they call it, Mount Vernon, and I was also for a long time, the only African American that could give a tour in Pennsylvania Avenue. All of that was based upon books and research, not lived experience. Right. Because now I am meeting people that are giving me the real story. Okay, they're telling me, okay, you can read that book if you want to, but this is the real story. But in 20 years that I have been here, it is like why I love what I do, why I respect Baltimore from a historical point of view. Yes, and I'm going to say it, Baltimore has challenges. Yeah. But what I'm going to say, Rob, is that Baltimore doesn't have any more challenge than any other city I've ever lived in. Okay? Prince George's is set up in such a different way. You don't get it like you do for a city. Yeah. They got problems. DC's got problems. Chicago's got problems. And I've been to every single one of those places. I've been to Los Angeles. I lived in Los Angeles. And I will tell anybody, Los Angeles had probably 200, if that many, gang members when I was in high school in Los Angeles. 200. That was Bloods and Crips. The administration of the Los Angeles Police Department and the Sheriff's Department admittedly let them get bigger. They let it happen. And then it just exploded. Yeah. And it became really more of a internal cultural problem because they were killing people and families and the whole shebang. Very similar to what's going on in Baltimore. I don't know if it's gang related, but I will tell you it is no different. Every city has its challenges. It's just what I tell people. It's not a joke, but casually I tell people the reason why we get top billing because B is at the top of the alphabet. Yeah. Go down the list: Baltimore, Chicago, Louisiana, blah 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 blah. We're at the top, so we get it all.
Yeah, and I'll throw it. I mean, we're speaking the same language. Yeah. And as I'll give you this detail. I think I haven't shared on this podcast before that I have two older half siblings, but I was already like a teenager when I met them. So I always have been like the older brother, and it's like, yeah, you're the middle child. I was like, no, I'm not. That's kind of my energy. I have a younger brother, and I have these two older siblings. Like, yeah, you're like little Rob. I was like, nah, I'm very much an independent thinker, and I'm the traveler. I'm the one that dove into this, podcasting back in 2009 before it even, people were like, what's a podcast? And I've been doing it as long just out of my own interest, and that goes back to sort of that vision thing of, well, I know this makes sense. And I think getting the real story, that's a key thing that I heard when you were describing of like, you're getting sort of in this career trajectory, you're getting sort of I'm learning this from the books and so on, and that's giving me this sort of like baseline, but also let's make it more well-rounded. What are the people who have lived it? What are they saying? And that is part of what this podcast is for. It's art, culture, community. And people say, oh, well, it's got art in the title. I was like, yeah, culture and community are a big piece of it because they feed them. They feed that. They feed the art. So having a sense of, what is the culture in Baltimore? One could say DIY is a big thing here. And that's going to pop up in the art. That's going to pop up in the business owners. That's going to pop up in how communities are organized.
Yeah.
And so it's like all of those conversations, they need to intersect. So speaking of which, I want to hit you with this question. I read that it's at times like this sort of disconnect, and I think it's a really good place to have this. It's sort of a disconnect observed with regard to the history in Baltimore, and how so it's a disconnect when it comes to the history here, and I'll even add to it. It's like some stories and some voices, they get the chance to say what their story is and what their Baltimore is and so on, or their like heritage is, and others it's like, you can quiet down, less about y'all. How do you see like your role in the role here in Baltimore National Heritage Area, like supporting and bridging that gap?
It can be challenging because everybody wants their story to be front and center, okay? If you look at Baltimore historically, you have, so you had indigenous people here first. Mm-hmm. Then you had the white Europeans come in and push them out of the way, take over the land. And then with that, they bring in enslaved or indentured servants to be here. Mm-hmm. Then following that, you have a insurgence of immigrants that came here, escaping war and unpleasantries in their country. Speaking of the Irish, who were lower class, not identified as the blue bloods mm-hmm. of the Europeans, so they were treated like garbage. And then you have a whole litany of other people that came here. Mm-hmm. Now, why do I put that out there is because whose story gets to be told first?
Yeah.
None of them. Collectively, they made Baltimore what it was. Unfortunately, the majority of Baltimore was built on enslaved and indentured black people. Mm-hmm. Then you come and you put the layer of the Europeans saying, well, we don't want to talk about that.
Yeah.
We did our part. We did not concede to the South. We fought it as long as we could. We don't want to talk about that. So everybody's history gets pushed out to the front except for African Americans who are standing in the shadows with so much contribution mm-hmm. to the building of this city, brick by brick, mm-hmm. that it deserves to be brought to the front now. We are now in a renaissance. Mm-hmm. May not be Harlem Renaissance. It may not be the Renaissance that happened in 20 years ago when Bill Clinton moved to Harlem. But we are in a renaissance. Yeah. And it's time to recognize those people that put their life, their limbs, their blood in building the city. Now, how do I reckon that? Yeah. As a heritage area, anybody has an opportunity to come to us and ask us, will you support this project? Will you grant this project? That's how we do it. I don't, as a black woman, people would think, and they do put me in that position. As a black woman, you should be one to tell my story. Mm-hmm. I would not be, I can't say fair, equitable, and equal if I take one story over another story because right. I'm a black woman. Right. This is an organization. You didn't ask me for my personal opinion. Mm-hmm. You're asking me from an organizational point of view. And from an organizational point of view, everybody's story is important. Mm-hmm. Yes, I do have affinity to black stories because that's what people want. Yeah. It's sort of like the news. If it bleeds, it leads. People right now want to know about black people because they have not known. Yeah. So you're going to give them what they want.
And that's one of the things that I encounter in doing this series, right? So as I touched on earlier, I'm a black guy that's almost 40, mm-hmm. and I'm from Baltimore. So the way I curate and the way I select people everybody doesn't come on here. I don't invite everyone on here. There are some people, it's like, I don't have a lot of interest in kind of how you go about things or what you're doing.
I just feel, that makes me feel so warm inside. I feel so privileged.
But in it, the sort of sensibility is sitting there of, well, this is my perspective or what have you. Now, as it gets to a spot where, let's say this becomes a project that's like fully funded, I have to think of these sort of other considerations. That's a factor that comes into play. But also, I've had folks who hit me in the DMs that will question how Black I am, or question how much of a Baltimorean I am, because it's like I'm broadening out what that narrative is based on what my interest is. And folks will ask me, how do you curate it? It's like, whatever interests me. I'm going to have this sensibility because I am this, but also I'm into a lot of other things that catch my attention and curiosity.
We're not, as Black people, we don't have all the same interests.
Right. It's not a monolith.
We're not monolithic, and white people aren't. So why you expect me? Because of my skin tone? Mm-hmm. No. Now, I do like some beats to my music, if that's what you're going to ask me. I want to hear some rhythm in there. But you'd be surprised at what I listen to on my Sirius radio. Okay?
Same thing.
See, that's what I'm saying. And then a person that grew up in Utah, do you know what the first music I ever heard was? Definitely, nobody would even know who this is, but David Cassidy and the Partridge Family.
I know that is.
So okay, the Osmonds. So when you have that kind of learning and that kind of environment, that's what takes me out of the box. Mm-hmm. Okay, it doesn't put me in that box. So people are interested in different things.
It gives the sort of crossover thing where, when I do these interviews in other cities, as I was talking about earlier with New Orleans, I see that New Orleans connection to Baltimore. I see that Philadelphia connection. I see that DC connection. And I made a concerted effort to say, like, all right, let me do a little bit more work there. It's something that clicks. Whenever I go there, it's a feeling, it's a sensibility that pops. And this is the thing that's really interesting, specifically because I've done a lot of the other interviews in Philly, right? Mm-hmm. I've had folks who's like, yo, bro, you from here? I was like, no, I'm from East Baltimore. I go very specific. I'm from East Baltimore, right? Yeah. And they're like, nah, you from here. And it's like, I am from Baltimore. And it's like, I see the beard, bro. It's like, look, I'm from Baltimore, right? And it is one of those things where they see that sort of likeness and that approach to it. And even the other thing of democratizing, right? Whose stories matter, whose voices matter.
Mm-hmm. There is a dotted line. If you go back historically and look at all the things, like you mentioned it earlier about the niche museums and Baltimore City of First. So the City of First does something. If you do a dotted line out of Baltimore to every major city, every major port, Baltimore is the mothership. Mm-hmm. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because we are connected to every place, whether it was through the Great Migration of people moving to Chicago and other places out of Baltimore. The trains that took people out of Baltimore, took shipments, took cargo out of Baltimore. If you take and you look at the enslaved people that were caught here, that were manumitted, caught here, and taken deep south into Louisiana and other places to work the cotton fields. We are prime. We are prime. You got to recognize, you got to come to Baltimore and see, why are you so important? Mm-hmm. And people do ask all the time, are you from here? And I don't turn up my nose like, no, I'm not from here. I say, no, I'm not. I'm not. Yeah. But I am passionate about Baltimore. I'm just as passionate about Baltimore as I am San Francisco Bay Area. Mm-hmm. Because those are the two places that I can now say I have spent the most time in. Now I am edging up of being here longer than I was in California. But those are the two places, and to me, they have very no, they don't. At one time, well, no, I'm going to say my last visit there and checking back with my friends and colleagues back there, So I'm going to wrap this to another something. So you're going to have to either splice this out or you can do whatever you want to. But they're very connected from a landscape point of view. The water, all that kind of stuff. That's what attracted me to it, because I was like, this is like a little slice of home, right? It looks the same. The problem is that for both places, is the gentrification of neighborhoods, number one. Did it in the Bay Area, did it in San Francisco, and the absolute audacity of people with money building another Baltimore outside of Baltimore that really does give me heartburn. I'm talking about the Baltimore Peninsula.
Oof, gets spicy. Love it.
That is another Baltimore Peninsula and Harbor East.
Yeah.
Great attractions for people with money and affluent to come, but you are building another city outside the cities because you don't want to deal with the real problems. That is a problem for me. They did it in San Francisco too. Bayview, Hunters Point. They put those black people way up on that hill because it was close to the water, and now they're realizing that that is prime property. And they're trying to eradicate them. Where are they going to send them?
And that's sort
So
of
it's just really, that's what's getting under my skin right now.
that's sort of one of the things that you see and you start asking questions. And I think what we were talking about beforehand, why, I could take a hint. It's like, I'm just doing the too real of a thing. And maybe that's why certain folks don't really support what I'm doing in a really tangible way. But, when I started asking questions, I get curious. Like, what we were talking about coming up, like that East Baltimore, that the library and all. And I'm like, yeah, it's cool. Let's do that. I was like, so these other entities, I'll start asking questions. Where's the market and where's the stuff over here for people? Same thing I was saying. I said I walked around here in a bit. It's like, this is a historical area. There's a couple museums over here. This is here. But it's like, where's sort of the investment? And then to your point about, that heartburn, it's like, and there are investments in other places. And I was like, because it's not a priority. It's like, it's no longer at a point of asking questions as much as, and I know what this is, because every city's the same. And, it was one point when I first started, as you touched on it earlier, when people talk about, well, Baltimore's this and that, it's like, it's the same. This is, I go up there to Philly, I know the same places to go. I was like, there's going to be a coffee place right there on that corner, and there's the gentrification I ordered. It's kind of like back to back. Right. But you know what you're looking for. So I want to ask this. Question, because film has come up. Film has come up in some of the research. So can you tell us a bit about the film Voices of the Black Butterfly? Because I think all of this connects.
Well, like I said, the vision. So let me just say this. I am not a filmmaker.
No one is.
No, but like, I've just been realizing, it's like, oh, you're supposed to be telling a story in a film, aren't you? Okay, so I'm not a filmmaker. I've worked with two really good filmmakers in producing some products that we have out, so I'm going to answer your question, but let me go back to the original first film that we did, which is By Any Means Necessary, Stories of Survival. 2019, I become the Heritage Area's ED, and I'm like, but right the year before that, 18, there was just a lot of conversation about the squeegees. Blah, 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 blah. They're doing this, they're doing that. I don't want to see them. Oh, yeah, whatever. And curiosity. I'm like, I wonder why they do it. Well, I become the ED. Now I can do what I want to do, okay? I don't have to ask anybody except for my board, can I spend some money like this? And they say, well, you know what? We don't get into the management. You do what you need to do. Okay, fine. So I produced that film.
Yeah.
It was heartbreaking. It was truthful. And I'm telling you, nobody hardly wanted to see it. It was hard. You talk about shopping your products around, saying, it's like, nah. We were lucky to get it on MPT. I was able to take it down to Annapolis. It wasn't like it was a cure-all. It was just opening Pandora's box and saying, look, there's a lot of problems. You can't just take people off the corner and think that you're going to change their lives by giving them a job at $15 an hour. Yeah. It's not going to change. So I did that. Then we were doing a lot of outreach, and usually what comes up, Rob, is people ask, what is a heritage area? It's not tangible. I can't touch it. Yeah. So what is it? So I said, you know what? I'm going to do a film about interviewing a very multicultural group of people from different walks of life, different aspects, about what it is about Baltimore that makes Baltimore different. The Miles Banks was the videographer, and he did a wonderful job. So he interviewed, we interviewed, 8 or 9 people. I cannot remember off the top of my head. We interviewed a number of people: white, black, Chinese, Native American. What else? What else did we hit? Latinx from the CLO, Women at Creative Alliance. We interviewed all of these people for their take on culture, their take on Baltimore, their take on where they fit in it. And then on top of that, Miles did some aerials of the city. We had fantastic weather when he did it. It wasn't dark and gray. He did some great. And then we introduced what is a heritage area.
Nice.
So that is what the intention was from Voices of Blood. Now, I got my film, did it a little backwards. What do you want to call it? At the same time, there was a lot of conversation about the legacy of the black butterfly. Yeah. That's it. There's no trademark on that, so we called it the Voices of a Black Butterfly, because we were taking perspectives from all over the butterfly and saying what a heritage area is. Yeah. So that was the impetus for me making that film, is because I really wanted people to know what a heritage area is, why we do this work. There are 62 heritage areas across the country, all of us different. Yeah. I say my heritage area is probably the smallest geographically, because I am in one jurisdiction, but I am not the full city.
Right.
So mine's probably the smallest, where a lot of other heritage areas go multiple counties. They go in a vertical way instead of a horizontal way. So I'm the smallest, just the right size for me, because I don't really like politicking. When you have multiple jurisdictions, you have to politic with commissioners, county execs from all these different places. You've got to make sure everybody's on the same page. I got just one set of people that I have to deal with, other than my state delegates and my federal congressional leads. But that's only at a max. That's 3. Yeah. At the federal level, 2 at the 2, and I say that because there's senators at the state level, and then city council. Yeah. So it's just big enough for me. And the other thing is that Baltimore's very insular.
Sure.
Very 6 degrees by separation kind of thing going on here, right? And so if you know one person, then you can easily get to another person because that person knows the other person. So, but that was the point of making Voices of a Black Butterfly, is because I really wanted to educate people on what makes a heritage area. We are talking about 2 different things. And people say, what's the difference between, and I speak to this because of the podcast, there is heritage area, and then we talk about culture. Okay, so people say, well, they're the same thing. And technically, depending on how you talk about them, they are the same thing. However, in our world, the way that we defined it, heritage is the history of something. Culture is the way of doing something. So that's how we do that. So we are not only a heritage area, but we are a cultural preservationist as well. We want to be able to preserve people's culture.
Yeah.
We don't want to homogenize everybody. You know, that was the problem in the 60s.
Yeah.
Perms and a little hair, and we got, in order to fit in, assimilation. We don't have to assimilate anymore. Now we can all celebrate who we are individually. We can bring that up to the top, and then we have our history that carries us forward. Okay, so that's what made me decide to do Voices of the Black Butterfly.
Thank you. It's one of the things where, especially in doing this, like, people like this. People, you know, when I have different things that I'm doing and they look at the card and they see the picture on the card, it's just a cartoon, and they see me. If I'm wearing that hat, which is a real hat, they're like, "You're a guy, you're a dude." And I was like, "Oh." And people are like, "You have groupies?" I was like, "I do not. I'm just a guy that does a podcast." But the point I think I'm getting at is, people are looking for sort of the real. People are looking for what feels like an authentic conversation, and there's some truth, if you will, in what goes on there. So people gravitate towards that, and if you can work in and pepper in, you know, at least from what I'm doing and how I approach it, if I can pepper in, you know, this is a moment in time. I'm capturing their story at this time. You know, we may do an interview in 2 years or another year from now or what have you, and that priority may shift, but it's still sort of like capturing this as a moment in time for folks to look further, to like continue down that path. This is the invitation, really.
Did you happen to notice that after the murder of George Floyd, that people start talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Oof, Jedi, yeah. Justin's at the beginning too sometimes. Yeah. Huh?
I'm serious. I mean, there were probably universities and individuals that were doing the work prior to that, but it did not claim those acronyms until that point.
I feel like the SEO, you know, the search engine optimization went up because I was doing 2 podcasts actually during that summer. You know, and I was doing this one, and this is, you know, we're home for the most part. So a lot of time to do more interviews and do more work and spend more time on online and on the Instagram. And I'm a 6'4", 300-pound black man. So that's what my experience is. And I remember I was very vocal about sort of what that experience looks like, and it's, you know, related to what happened, you know, the murder of George Floyd and sort of the protests and the actions around that. And, you know, I had people in my DM, that didn't happen. Stick to arts. None of this stuff that you experience. I was like, you're going to tell me what my experience is. So it's interesting. It's like, be real and talk about things in this way. And I'll throw this in there because I got 2 more questions I want to key in on, but I'll throw this in there because I think it's funny. You know how you have like sort of like Civil War reenactments and stuff. So it's like, it was a video, it was really funny. It was Civil War reenactment, and it's this guy, black dude, he pulls up, he's kind of got like shackles on. He's like, I want to play, I want to be a part of this. And they were like, sir, you can't do this. This wasn't happening during this time. He's like, but it was. He's like, can I be in? This is historically accurate, right? And it was like, we don't want to talk about that. And I was like, huh. You don't. And it's this, because I noticed at that time, it's this sort of sanitizing of what things have been. Because also during that summer, I've seen a few more disclaimers of things that some viewers may find us to be racially insensitive. I was like, but you shot it, wrote it, filmed it, edited it, and chose for it to be there. And now, 20 years removed or what have you, now we're considering it. It's already done the damage. It's already made us money. So it's that work is happening, obviously, but also it seems like people needed to make their statement around it to seem like we're not messed up. It's like, are you?
Yeah.
So let's talk about programs. Let's talk about programming that's coming up, because I see spring, fall, heritage, recreational programs that are coming up. Are any that you can speak to as of now? And
well, let me go back and give you a run through.
Love run throughs.
I know. Well, let me give you a run through. I don't want to start with I want to start with things that are coming and then lead into the thing that's coming up. So, if you recall, I mentioned that when I became an ED, one of the things is about youth. I'm really, so I do a film about By Any Means Necessary. I see these young men who are, basically they're challenged. They are challenged in a lot of ways. But I'm more concerned about giving youth an opportunity to be children. Our young kids don't have a chance to be. They are struggling with so many things at home, at school, in life that I wanted to find programs that really can let them be children. Yeah. So my predecessor and Fort McHenry came up with a program called Kids in Kayaks. So they identify 8th graders because they're at the age where you think you can trust them. I'm saying this in parentheses because at that time I remember the teacher saying, "Do you know at 8th and 7th and 8th grade they're practically insane, don't you? Because the hormones are surging and they are just like." And they are, but we picked 8th graders. So 8th graders go out on the middle branch and they learn about the history of the water, what that means to Baltimore, but they also get to have a recreational opportunity at the same time. It's not, all of us learn differently. And sometimes through activity, the actual lesson or the curriculum will stay in the mental capacity. So they do Kids in Kayaks. Well, my idea was, let's do kids on bikes, on trails, because I realized that there are a number of young people in Baltimore that do not know how to ride a bike.
I don't know how to ride a bike.
Shut up.
Sorry.
Shut up. Oh my God. Okay, well anyway, that's okay.
I was a
that's
skateboarder.
Okay. It doesn't matter. You still need to know how to ride a bike. Okay, you need to know how to ride a bike. Everybody needs to know how to ride a bike. So, that's the whole intention. And so we are doing 9th and 11th graders because they can be trusted to get on a bike and stay within the track. Yeah. So we do biking from Gwynn Falls. That's one of the trails. The other trail is around the fort, which I'll get to that. Around the fort to learn about the history of the fort, and they get to learn how to ride a bike. The practices, they learn how to ride a bike, they learn how to fix a bike, they understand safety, so that they can go home and be a part of a community. Yeah. So those are the 2 programs. We also have a program for little 4th graders called Every Kid in the Park. Well, it's called something else now, but we won't get into that. And 4th graders are taken to, which is outside of my heritage area, so I'll be very honest about that. Is Hampton, and they learn about the Hampton location, and then they go to Carrie Murray Center, and they go to Fort McHenry and it's a part of their 4th grade curriculum. Nice. And this year we introduced a program called Arts in the Park. It was mainly a trauma diffuser with an educational component. So they had an artist come in, set up canvases. They gave them different color paints and told them to make their own flag. And they could do it any way they wanted to. So they slammed paint up against a canvas, and some of them did well, some of them just expressed themselves, which it's called a diffuser. Yeah. Just get it out, because some of these kids are coming from neighborhoods that are just riddled with crime and gunshots, and they just needed to let go. So that is my place with the children. So that's what we're doing in the fall. So we'll run that program with Baltimore Public Schools in the fall till it gets too cold, and then we come back in the spring and we do it again in the spring. So we are engaging Baltimore. We also work with charter schools as well. So it's any of those 8th grade 9th and 10th, 11th graders and 4th graders that want to come and do that. So that's one thing that we're doing. We have this is the thing that I really want to put out there. So wherever you are, we have the It's a Snap photo contest that is running from April through December 31st. We changed the whole model for this year only is to capture what makes Baltimore charming. It's not just the buildings that make it charming, it's the people.
That means it's just going to be a lot of pictures of good old Rob Lee popping up. No, I'm kidding.
Okay. Well, that's fine. We'll take a picture of Rob Lee. But, what we want pictures that are inclusive of the landscape of Baltimore, but people in them. So we've got lots of festivals going on. We're back out of the COVID era. So people are out. They're enjoying it. We've had some really hot weather. So that's an opportunity to see pools and people walking their dogs and so we're hoping that by December 31st we will have a collection of photos to do a online jury, and the winners, we will select 13. They will have an opportunity to have an exhibit at the Peel.
Wow,
in
that's
March.
Great. Yeah.
So we're going to have an exhibit, and hopefully we'll have some great pictures showing what makes Baltimore special and charming. You know what I mean? It's Charm City, it's the Monumental City, it's the Star Spangled Banner City. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. It is a charming place to visit, to work, and play.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing. And then what you really want to know about is on July the 29th, I believe that is. Yes, it is. It's a Saturday. We are going to be encore screening Voices of a Black Butterfly at Creative Alliance. It is open to the public. It is free. And then we are going to have a community town hall about culture and how it integrates into each neighborhood in Baltimore. And I'm going to ask you a trivia question.
Okay.
So, how many separate neighborhoods make up Baltimore? The mosaic of neighborhoods.
I wrote that in a later question. I want to say 50-ish.
Rob, there's 274 eclectic neighborhoods.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
The tapestry. Every place has, it might only be 4 blocks, but it's a neighborhood. Okay, so like Union, the Hollands Market neighborhood, there's 274.
Wow.
The Heritage Area only has 136 in our encatchment.
Yeah.
So
It's about half.
It's about half. So we are a city of neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. Each one of those neighborhoods has a story. Yeah. Now, what makes that story is very unique. It might be the immigration story, it might be segregation, but each one has its own story. So that's what it is. Now, that is what we're going to do. And what's going to be my biggest question at this town hall, which I'm not going to be the facilitator. Janine Whitfield from American Visionary Arts Museum is the facilitator. But my biggest question is, and this is to you.
I want a spot here.
You're on the spot because you are East Baltimore person,
yes,
right?
I am. Gang, gang.
I am, believe me, my head hurts. My head hurts.
Middle
Baltimore
East,
is one city. It is not two. It is not North and South Carolina. It is one city. How come we've got 2 different sets of people?
It's just different vibes.
Well, you know what? Ain't no lie about that. But when you're an outsider coming in and you're trying to do collective history and storytelling, you're like, what you talking about?
It's like the thing where, like, my partner, she's a New Yorker.
Oh my God.
So it's a version of that. When she came down, she was like, no, I get it. She's like,
gets it.
She's like, I've lived in all the boroughs, and people say, oh, it's just New York, and she's like, that's Manhattan. So that's number one.
Yeah, but, okay.
But Baltimore is very small in that regard as well.
Yes.
Whereas New York is enormous. So yeah.
And I get it where you could go out to Long Island and live your whole life in Long Island and never go into Manhattan. I cannot get it through my head that you live in East Baltimore and you have never been to Carroll Park.
I have been to Carroll Park. So
you are a traveled man. You don't count.
You're right.
But you don't count. I don't understand lived in Baltimore your whole life and never been to Patterson Park.
I'll say this. This is
it blows my mind.
This is the thing I would hear all the time, and I would hear it at Morgan when I was there. You would you talk to different folks. You had folks from DMV, Baltimore,
right.
And I just remember one guy in the back was like, "Y'all don't go over east." And someone from DC asked me, what does he mean? I was like, he's likely in East Baltimore, West Baltimore will not go over East Baltimore. Mm-hmm. It's like, Baltimore's not that big. It's like, I know. And that's the rub.
It's just amazing to me. And I cannot, my staff member, outreach manager, she's a West Baltimorean. And we were talking about, she was thinking about moving, right? And I was like, well, this is a cute little house over here. She goes, that's East Baltimore. I'm not moving over there. I'm like, what? This is a great house. I'm not living over there. I can't explain it to you. I don't want to live over there. And we had a big old rub about that.
It's almost like being from a different country in some regards. Like a lot of my family's from West Baltimore, and I was born in like West Baltimore, so it's like, oh, okay, cool. But it's like when I was 5, I moved to Lafayette Projects, and we've been in the East Baltimore for the last 33 years. So it's just like very much East Baltimorean. But some of my other family members, my dad and my brother, they live out there in the county, and they refuse to come into the city. And I was like,
do they really?
It's a whole other angle. It's like
they don't want to come to the city.
No, and I was like, everything is here though. Like there's
nothing. Which county are they in? Baltimore County or Anne Arundel?
Like they're in Cockeysville, so
yeah, they're close enough.
It's like we love going to Pennsylvania. I was like, Dutch country? You go to Dutch country, but won't come into the city. I was like, all right, cool, you get it. That makes sense.
But that's the big question that will be on my. If they give me a question, it's like, so. What would make you go to West Baltimore? What kind of event or what kind of activity would draw you to East Baltimore? What is it that makes you? And so the other piece of this, the reason why this is a curious thing to me is because as a heritage area, I represent both sides.
100%, yeah.
And so what I'm trying to do is, and what we, not just me but myself, what I failed to do is to crack the egg in East Baltimore. So I have been engaging the East Baltimore Historical Library and having this event at Creative Alliance. I really want to get the heritage area to get more engaged in East Baltimore.
Yeah.
Because they don't even know I'm over here. You know what I'm saying? They're just like, oh, that's a West Baltimore thing. I represent the entire structure of storytellers, whether you're from East, West, North, or South.
Yeah.
So that's one reason why we picked Creative Alliance. They're a great partner, so we decided to go there. And then Janine is fantastic.
Absolutely.
And she said I would be more than happy. She didn't know I was trying to get her somebody I know that she's very close to be the facilitator and be the guest. And she says, oh no, this is mine. I'm like, okay. So, and then the last thing I really want to emphasize to you and your listeners in this podcast, and especially those of African American descent that are native to Baltimore, have lived here all their lives, their parents lived here all their lives, their grandparents lived here all their lives, and their great-great-grandparents, is that I want them to engage at Fort McHenry. Now, we've got 2 problems, okay? There's the flag, an issue. There is the War of 1812 and the Battle in defense of Baltimore in 1814. In that time, there were black people that were still enslaved.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, this is where I get really serious and I get really passionate. That fort could not have existed without black people, like I said earlier, life, limb, blood lost to build it.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about no battles. You built it.
Yeah.
It is sacred ground to you. Do not let that alienate you from going there. It is a park. The fort, it's called Fort McHenry because there is a fort there. Mm-hmm. But in the bigger picture of everything, it is a beautiful fort and park with ramparts where you can see the water. You can sit there, you can ride your bike, you can walk your dog, you can have a lunch. I want people to take it back.
Yeah.
Take it back. Don't let it belong to somebody else. It belongs to you, because if you are native to this place called Baltimore, and I'm talking about generational native, it belongs to you, because more than likely there isn't a brick, there isn't a stone that some black person did not put their hands on. So it is sacred ground. And I want people to recognize that. So on Defenders Day, which is normally September the 12th, on September the 16th is the official Defenders Day celebration, where you will see hundreds of 42 to 75-year-old white people out there. I do want to see some black people represented, other than myself and a few others. Mm-hmm. Come to the fort, make representation, stand on that hallowed ground, and claim it back. Don't give it to anybody else. We have given up enough.
It's great. It's great. Thank you. I think that's actually where we can end on the real questions.
Okay.
But you got to get the rapid fire questions.
I heard that before.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
So, rapid fire.
Okay.
This is the way this works. I got 5 of them.
Okay.
No, 4. I got 4. I just have 4. So you're lucky. You just have 4.
Okay.
Don't overthink them. Just whatever the answer is. It's like I said what I said. All right. So here we go.
Yeah.
Here's the first one. What was the last book you read?
Oh, okay. This has come up before. I have a Gullah Geechee New Testament Bible sitting on my bed, and I am trying to get through that Bible, because the language is very different than what I've ever heard before. So my friend that is down in the Gullah Geechee Heritage Area, she sent me the Bible, and then it's sitting on my bed nightstand, and I tried to get me a read every now and then.
I hear you.
Okay.
So because I listened to a previous interview of yours, I modified this next question a little bit. What is the most fascinating Baltimore historical fact you've learned in the last year? Because I remember you qualified it for the person asking you. I liked it.
No, last year. God, what did I say? I have no idea.
No, you like they didn't have it on a time frame. You're like, nah. Well, this is what I've learned in the last year, and I was like, okay, this is good. Yeah.
You gotta make me think that one over, because I don't know what I said.
Well, you can just say anything that comes to mind in terms of like just an interesting factoid that's popped up.
Oh, there's just, you know what? There's a lot of stuff I don't know that one day I learned. I'm doing a research for National Park Service for the America 250. Mm-hmm. So we were trying to identify different people that would be good for this. And if I remember correctly, so I may be misquoting, somebody's going to call me and say you're wrong, but what I remember from the historian is that Baltimore had the first Planned Parenthood facility. Yeah. And it was for all women. It wasn't just for white women. And in light of what just happened in the last year, mm-hmm. There goes another first for Baltimore. Okay, that's one.
You've described Baltimore as a mosaic or a quilt. I listen to podcasts. Could you tell us, in that vein, could you tell us 2 hidden gems or lesser known spots? It could be any type of spot. It could be like, I like to go over there to get this chicken, that's fire. But also I like to get my smoothies here. What is the lesser known spots that are like on your list of must go to places in Baltimore? With your 274
neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So the one place that I've enjoyed is the Gwynns Falls. I went there. Well, I actually was in what is that? Windsor Mills. Windsor Hills. It's Windsor Hills, isn't it? Yeah, Windsor Mills. It's Windsor Mills. I was in Windsor Mills about 12 years ago. Didn't know where I was.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. And then later years, I was able to go to that same community to take my godson to Outward Bound.
Yeah.
And during that, I was able to experience the outdoors.
Yeah.
And so I think that it is just beautiful, and it's inside a city, which was kind of neat. And then I also like Montebello, Lake Montebello. I love Lake Montebello.
Near City College, where I went to school last.
Well, I walked around it, and I really did think that, because, you're always seeking those things that you're nostalgic for. And it reminded me of Lake Merritt in Oakland.
Nice.
So, therefore, yes, those are my hidden gems. Now, I got a problem with food because I don't eat just anything, but I am stuck, and this is a shout out to them. Everybody's gonna say, why would you pick them? I am stuck on Ikiben.
Oh, no, that's fire.
I am stuck on crunchy shrimp and tempura broccoli.
Tempura broccoli is fire.
I love it. And so those are my hidden gems. And then I found out that there's 3 of them, so I could go into 3 different ones.
Yeah.
Anywhere I am, I could go to a Ikiben.
So this is the last one. This one was retired for a while because people were really look, man, that's a political question, bro. You can ask me that. It's a ridiculous question. It's as simple as, what is your preference? Chunky or creamy when it comes to your peanut butter? People thought it was a political question. That's how controversial some people felt it.
I eat peanut butter. I don't care.
See, whatever it is.
If it's chunky, I don't. When I go to the store, I don't go say, "Oh, I gotta have chunky." I like both of them.
Yeah.
Now the problem with chunky is that it tears your bread up. If you just use regular bread and you don't toast your bread, that's the only thing that kind of tears it up. But I like both of them.
Yes. It depends. For me, it depends on the jelly, right? So
what kind of jelly you like?
I like strawberry.
Oh, no.
Strawberry preserves, to be exact.
Oh, no. I like grape. That's what you got to ask that question.
Grape's a little too much.
Grape is just too generic.
It's a little generic.
Yeah, it's generic. Okay.
I like the French mixed berry one with the...
Well, let me just tell you the story. When you grew up in a house where the people in the house make grape jelly...
Well, that's different. That's much different.
That's why you like grape jelly. I grew up in a house where they made grape jelly. But I'll tell you something.
So.
This is what I used to eat as a kid. On Sunday, my grandma would say, we're going to bake a cake. Mm-hmm. Now, she wasn't going to bake no cake where it was going to have frosting and everything else. She'd bake a cake after our dinner. And guess what I used to put on it?
Yes.
People say I'm country. I am not country. Applesauce.
That's not bad, actually.
It's delicious, and especially if the applesauce is fresh, because grandmother would go pick apples, and she would come home and she would make applesauce, because real applesauce, is not yellow.
No, it's not.
It's pink, because they leave the skin on it as they stir it, and we would take and have hot cake with applesauce over it, and that would be the snack. And I'm telling you, it was delicious.
That's fantastic.
So anyway, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
See, that was like a little factoid to kind of wrap on. So, one, I want to thank you for coming on to this podcast and spending some time with me and invite me into the office. And 2, I want to invite and encourage you in these final moments to share the website where folks can check out more. The floor is yours.
I don't have much to say other than go to explorebaltimore.org, reach out and find us on Instagram. We are also on Facebook. And if you really want to talk to me, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's what I like. I like to have interactions on LinkedIn. I can have real conversations with people. But no, I really appreciate this opportunity, Rob, to talk about the heritage area, because it is something that people can't touch. Yeah. So it's hard for them to get. It's like, what's a heritage area? You should see their face. Their face is like, what's that? It's hard to touch, but it is just basically a collective place of our history, our culture, and the landscape, and what makes this place wonderful. And I will tell you, I'm not supposed to do this, but there are 62 heritage areas across the country. Yeah. And all you got to do is go on to MPS and look up National Heritage Area. And our intention is to work with our partners, work with businesses, work with local government to encourage heritage tourism, which means taxpayers paying money, make quality of life for everyone, not just for some, and a place to play. Yeah. It's your backyard park. So that's what a heritage area is.
And there you have it, folks. I want to again thank Shauntee Daniels from the Baltimore National Heritage Area. And I'm Rob Lee, saying that there's art, culture, community in and around your neck of the woods. You've just got to look for it.